Welcome back to the Spinner Rack, all of you new maniacs here at the Marvel New Universe Comics Podcast, aka the voice of the new universe. We're your hosts, Stephen and
Your name is written first in the script.
yeah, it's usually the other way around. Oopsie.
I guess I botched that one. I think I wrote that up. But yeah. And Andy, Stephen and Andy. If you
All
haven't
right.
figured that out by now, or if this is your first episode of the show ever, it's always Stephen and Andy.
Yes. Stephen's the one who's speaking now, and Andy's the one who always sounds clear and like audible in the
I got teacher mode plus dad mode. I gotta enunciate.
I just if all of my comments sound like they're through gritted teeth, that's really my standard mode. Here we are, 52 weeks and 99 books in at almost 2,300 pages by my count. We have the new universe from issues 7 to 12 and Ink 1, number 13 for you for this episode. It is our what we called phase 2 or season 2 of the new universe, the back half of the first year, where we still have all 8 ongoing titles, but we do have distinct differences, I think, from the first 6 months.
Yeah, definitely.
So from phase 1 to 2, I would see our previous recap episodes for our thoughts on those, if I were you. And for differences from phase 2 to 3, 0 to 1? Anyway.
Well, it is kind of 1 to 2 then, right? If phase 1 we were finished with, phase 2 we just, read all of, right? So what's different in phase 2?
Right. What's different in phase 2 is we'll be looking at tonight a general situation with the new universe as it's getting to this point. We'll sort of recap what has happened and what's changed from phase 1, and we'll go through each book individually with where it went over this time. And as we've said, the new universe at the end of the first year canceled half the books, and we'll be taking these in sort of our usual order, except we'll first go through the 4 books that got canceled, and then we'll go through the 4 books that were continued, and we'll compare, try to see what their secret was, what the problems were with the canceled books, and the ups and downs through the 8 series we started with. The biggest change was probably that Jim Shooter left in this time period between Starbrand number 6 and whatever issues 12 of everything. Shooter pulled back a lot and then was fired in April of 1987, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the common knowledge backstory is generally like, he, a lot of his writers and artists didn't quite get along with him well as maybe some of the upper management, but he was also trying to buy Marvel Comics too with some investors. So I think he was probably, as we're, rounding out phase 2 of New Universe, right? He's probably spending less and less time working on it as he's kind of in a tough situation, plus trying to figure out if he can actually purchase Marvel Comics, which it sounded like he actually came pretty close to pulling off, but not quite.
Yeah, Shooter was had been editor-in-chief for I think about 10 years at that point. He definitely established Marvel as a powerhouse of publishing comics, and I mean they weren't just like the more popular publisher, they were dominant in the marketplace by my understanding. So
yeah,
I mean they'd go.
Oh no, you had a continuation of the thought, so you should go.
I've completely forgotten what it is now, though.
My job is done. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think like early on, editorially, he probably like it was more like shooter ruling with an iron fist kind of stuff, like sending back changes, like no, this ain't right. We got a bit of that from the Mike Rockwitz episode where we interviewed him. Go check that one out too if you haven't. But um, and then I'm guessing it got looser the rest of the way through, right? So things probably not as much having like the editor in chief saying like no, that's not right, that doesn't fit the new universe, and so things got a little more flexible, I think, for better or for worse.
Yeah, even though the new universe titles were a collaborative effort by several editors, Mark Gruenwald, Archie Goodwin did like half of them, Shooter, and I'm forgetting someone. Um, there was definitely, but by most accounts, Shooter was, of course, driving the new universe. He was the one who was like, this is a great idea to launch these books and have this imprint. And then he was also the one who was like, this is realistic and that is not. The suit that Spitfire wears is realistic. Like the robots showing up in Kickers Inc. was borderline. Um, so I mean, he had a vision, but yeah, he was probably more heavy-handed than the creators liked. You can imagine, like on a normal Marvel title, it's like as long as you didn't contradict a bunch of previous continuity, you were free to, do almost anything you could dream up. So
Yeah, I think we're going to get more of that kind of style comic booky world in phase 3 and 4, and like kind of moving on from here, because I think like the
yeah,
first 6 was very much like establish the characters with usually the founding creators swapping, right? So like the
handed off
founders,
to
the founders of these books didn't last a lot of times past a couple issues or something like that. And then in this group of books, like 6 to 12, I think a lot of them started to kind of find their writer. Funny that it was almost never quite the writer that we thought it was going to be from like Marvel Age or something. It's like Roy Thomas will be taking over Star Brand. Like, no, doesn't happen.
yeah. They definitely throw us a lot of curveballs in Marvel Age, which was as a reader at the time, that's really the only insight you have. I don't know, maybe if your comic shop owner was connected, I don't know. You would find out more. But yeah, we were constantly being told like someone is going to start this, someone else is going to start this. But yeah, you're right. The first few issues sort of established the book, and maybe they sort of took a bit to get their footing. So by the end of that first, half year, books had a creative team most of the time, or a direction that was maybe not exactly what they started with, but was like at least enough to keep going with.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the for the reputation of changing a lot of creative teams, honestly, it's not that bad. A lot of books had some more consistency than I expected going into this. So,
Right. And I think we've said this before, but we probably also benefit in that, uh, like reading each book once a month instead of like back to back to back to back. Like if such a thing as a Kickers Inc. graphic novel with the whole story in it existed, which it does not, like reading through that whole thing, it might be a lot more jarring than just kind of, you know, taking a month break in between, which is probably the better way to go.
yeah, that's really something I noticed as well. Yeah, Kickers Inc. You read a run of Kickers Inc. and you're kind of it's a little whiplash from
Mm-hmm.
story to story. But then if it's just one book out of 8, or even, back then you would probably be reading a bunch of other Marvel books too. I mean, you're not as, you know, sensitive to every little thing. And so if it's just gives you a fun story the next month, yeah, fine, moving on.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. So yeah, it sort of evens things out a bit to read them in this order. Definitely more than I remember the last time I tried reading a title by itself. Um, But let's see, is there much else? We did have a character die, a major
Right.
character, title character.
Are we trying to keep that a secret?
Spoilers. No,
Let's
it
call him
was
Mark H. No, M. Hazard. Which they
preserve
gave
his
away in Marvel
anonymity.
Age, kind of in a weird way.
Yeah, they had like a secret. It's like printed backwards in a mirror or something. I don't know.
No, it
No, it's
was
in the
just like it
spine
was
of the
tucked
book.
in the spine. Yeah, it's not quite
Um,
as it wasn't quite as gratuitous as the like letters page for Spitfire, where they're like, tune in next time where we'll be roasting the troubleshooters over a spit or something. It's like it's going to be real exciting as we kill these college kids.
yeah, they were not shy about that, but a couple of troubleshooters aren't really like title characters. Um,
I don't
so
know, aren't they
yeah, unfortunate.
technically title characters since their names are in the title?
I Yes.
At least
Okay.
until Steelhawk broke it, literally on the title, breaking the troubleshooters part
And
of
his
the
degree is in chemistry, but you would think he was a lawyer from his
logo.
solid defense of the troubleshooters as title character. Yeah, the Marvel Age, it did give us a few things that were coming up. And even now we've got sort of a look ahead through it. That's the best we're going to do at this trying to spoil ourselves on these things. So
Yeah,
we're minimizing that as much as we can otherwise.
I have one fun piece of new universe trivia, at least for like the first 25 or so issues. So I've got a pile of all of the finished series sitting on my floor. The Spitfire, Nightmask kickers, and Mark Hazards. And we always spend way too much time talking about like what was the color on the title of that the bar on the top that says New Universe, and typically it was black border, white letters, which for those 25 issues, 13 times was white with black background. Like that was the most popular option, followed by yellow, which appeared only 4 times, at least in those 4 titles. We saw orange once, gray twice, which I was honestly a little surprised at. Only once blue, once green, once another gray, green. Maybe I miscounted. And then a couple times they had reversed, like black letters, white border. That was twice. And then I think Nightmask in the end went black letters, red border.
Yeah, let me see, the 12th issues or that they started getting creative with. Then what was the annuals all had the sort of beginning black border, but there's like a white, black on white new universe at top, and then giant size annual below that, white on black.
Yeah, and Nightmask was the most colorful. Like almost every time the Nightmask cover had some kind of color, whereas Kickers was almost always black and white regular. So useless new universe trivia.
Useless. Some of the logos changed. You noticed the kickers had changed in the middle.
Yeah.
Merc lost Mark Hazzard right at the end. The others,
Spitfire and the
Spitfire
troubleshooter
lost
turned into
troubleshooters.
Spitfire, turned into codename Spitfire.
Yeah, we got books that changed their names, books that changed direction, books that changed their cast.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we'll start right in with Spitfire and the Troubleshooters, aka Spitfire, aka Codename Spitfire. This one actually goes from 7 to 13, so there was an extra bonus issue in there because of the funky month ahead that they were always doing. So
right, it survived just a little bit longer because it started just a little bit earlier. But yeah, our typical codename Spitfire. This was Professor Jenny Swenson, who stole and then destroyed her father's advanced max armor, also his AI.
Everything else he left.
She then briefly went to prison, and finally got herself shanghaied by the CIA. She was still Spitfire, and now she has a code name, or maybe it's her partner, or maybe the whole operation, or maybe her dad's password, or maybe the name of the armor.
Everything was Spitfire in Spitfire.
I think if the series had gone on a little bit longer, there would have been like another character who was also Spitfire. Some like fourth mechanic.
I'm also a genius at fixing cybernetic armor. Oh.
Yeah, so the arc of the last bunch of issues here, kind of leading up to the end. Issue 7 is where we really kind of lose the troubleshooters. So they have a showdown against Steelhawk. It does not go well. R.I.P. Andy, the troubleshooter. R.I.P. Tim's legs. And the other ones kind of made it out okay, at least to that point. Issue 8 was the Rolfing issue. Showdown between Giotti and the Strong Arms, ambushing Steelhawk, but he gets saved by his never to be seen again ninja girlfriend or something.
Maybe
it's
a machine gun toting ninja. Either be a ninja or use a machine gun. Don't do both.
And that was the first part of the CIA just being total jerks and basically kidnapping Jenny and torturing her to see if she would give up the information about the armor, which they already had or something. Issue 9, RIP Strong Arms. Those get destroyed because Giotti just wasn't feeling it anymore. Yeah, so I guess that's basically the last we see of any troubleshooters. Steelhawk's still alive, but he never really does much ever again. Jenny gets officially recruited, stuck on a plane, and stuck with noted psychopath Jake / oops, yeah, Hannigan. And they drop them into Afghanistan because that's what you do when you're the jerk CIA. Issue 9, though, also was the first appearance of VHS tape Professor Swenson. So, I mean, that's a key issue, I think. You might want to get that one graded.
Slabbed and graded. Thank you.
Yeah. Right, slabbed. Issue 10, they're fully Jenny and Jake in Afghanistan, fighting some Russians with max armor. That is RIP physics in that issue.
They were older maxes. They weren't cool maxes.
Maybe
that was the problem.
Perhaps made out of styrofoam.
In Soviet Russia, max is made out of you.
When you put the robot inside of you. Is that how you reverse that scenario?
That's the grossest mental image I've
There were some interesting pieces to kind of like Jenny in Afghanistan. We got a lot of Afghanistan in phase 2. But the part where like they trip a max armor with holding a rope, like each one holding one piece of it, always sticks in my mind. Anyway,
there's like many times I'll say cinematic realism is enough, but even then, in a movie theater, you'd be like, "Oh, come on,
tie it around a stump or something." The issue 11, they get out of Afghanistan. This is where we see the new suit, which had kind of shown up in pictures and like the corner of the cover and such. They kind of tested out with some battle in South America. We get a new team to a degree. The new max armor gets wrecked anyway. Issue 12 was the first appearance of AI Professor Swenson, not to be outdone by VHS tape Professor Swenson.
I think your concept of combining the two was the most promising thing we've seen yet. But
yeah, I've got more added to my fan fiction for that, but I'll wait till later to share that. But yeah, they fight some terrorists. And then 13, which was the final issue, flying cyborgs and yet another Max armor and yet another new guy, Willie. Um, and my notes say RIP Jenny's moral code.
Jeez.
Because that was the one where she's like, F it, it's okay to kill people.
Yeah, she's wholly consumed by the CIA's lies. It's a, I don't know, 13 was a real retro style one, where they're definitely not abiding by first principles of maximum realism.
No, it's a tough way to end the series too, because whereas a lot of the other books had some kind of closure, like you could tell, like they were at least trying to cram in an ending. Um, didn't really get that with Spitfire. It's just kind of like, all right, here's the last issue that we had finished.
Yeah, he's like, by the way, you just sold your soul to the CIA. They're the devil. Anyway, have a good time. Bye, Willie. Well, I'm Willie's out. Yeah, I don't know. Um, it's a yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in those issues. They never slow down. I gotta give them that.
Yeah. I would say like what worked is that it was kind of a lot of fun. Like there's a lot of kind of wacky stuff and kind of interesting characters. You know, again, while it's maybe objectively kind of silly, the continual return of her father in digital form was just kind of great. Like that's a high point for me, even if it was again goofy and maybe not that doesn't necessarily make that much sense.
For me, what worked, I mean, I like the initial direction more than I think the writers or editorial did. Um, but I would have been okay with like something more like Codename Spitfire, in that like if she had been out there trying to stop, international proliferation of max armors, sure, that makes sense for her to be involved in that. Even if it's like a spy kind of thing, you could, rationalize her involvement with it. Um, she ends up sort of feeling more like the pilot, like
Yeah,
she than like a scientist or a creator. So that's a little frustrating. Losing the troubleshooters and then the CIA gang that she hooks up with, her new boss is shown to be lying to her, and
mm-hmm.
tricking her. And they never sort of come back to that in any way. And she's never sort of expressing suspicion of him at a later point at which it should have come up. So would that have been a viable long-term thing, or I don't know.
Yeah, I would like just a little twist on it and maybe a more regular team to kind of follow through with it. But, if she was kind of reluctantly working with the CIA because she needed obviously like maybe their like legal protection and money, like for when this thing gets smashed to bits and she doesn't have a job anymore. Um, but then so maybe kind of play, like she's kind of being stuck between, what she really wants to do, kind of live her life, protect the kids, and try and get rid of internationally stolen max armors kind of thing. But she kind of needs the CIA to do it, but she doesn't really trust them. So there's kind of like an interplay there. But then you could have just kept the troubleshooters as like a backup team hanging out in the States, as like tech support almost, so like they're not going on missions if they wanted to go in that direction of like, all right, it's really unsafe for a bunch of college kids to go into robo combat. But they could have been finding these things kind of, using the mind hack thing and figuring out where they are. And then she goes to like South America where there's some, hacked together funky version of the Max armor. There's a lot of cool ways you could go with it.
Yeah, it would have, that would have been, worth following for a few more issues. So I don't know. Sometimes I honestly felt that the writers or the editors were just anti Spitfire, you know? It was like there was something about this character that they didn't want to work on. And so they sort of worked around her or tried to get her off stage or I don't know. Sort
Yeah,
of like if someone was told, like, I need you to write a book about this character, and you're like, may do anything but write about this character. I don't know. I don't know if yeah, I don't know.
yeah, because it
There's
really,
no
in the older issues, they pretty much had the troubleshooters took over the book for quite a while she was tossed in jail, having
all
parties
right.
with Big Bridget, and then after that, and they kind of made all these other characters that were kind of her equal, or like Jake Travis is kind of splitting the time 50-50.
Yeah, that was the still frustrating that Jake was like, oh, he's a crazy person. This was really gonna have some repercussions. I was the point of that. I don't know.
Yeah, we got maybe like one issue of that really
He was
meaning
slightly more
anything.
heavy-handed interrogating some prisoner than the regular people would be, but okay. It's also kind of a loss because there's it's one of the books that doesn't have paranormals, so it feels a little bit more, even if they're like flying suits, they're like more relatable in some way to normie people. So having a couple of those around would feel good in the new universe.
Yeah. In trying to think about why it wasn't renewed, this is a really interesting one because it looks like they spent a lot of time trying to kind of like give it another push, right? Like they gave it a new title. They had in-house ads for it, which like the other books didn't really get.
Mm.
So yeah, it's like, all right, here's a whole new direction, a whole new team, a new Max armor, like these advertisements and all this stuff. But then yeah, like they didn't really follow up on that. Like it took forever to see the actual new suit, and then when we did, it was only like twice.
Yeah, you've got creative like the I think Carrie Bates built it up for quite a while, and then you get a what it was like the Fabian Nicieza, and then a couple that felt very fill in.
Yeah,
So it may have just been, yeah, we built it up, but then shooter's gone, so no one cares anymore. Let's wrap it up. We had a couple of fill in issues in the bag. Let's throw them in and let it get on with wrapping
yeah,
it up. So yeah, I don't know. It's definitely I it always when we say, several of these books feels like a missed opportunity. This is one of the stronger cases where, give me the early direction, give me the second direction. Instead, you just kind of, yeah, whatever.
yeah. It's too bad. It's got so many elements that I like.
Exactly. There's the late issues are mostly, I mean, there's fun elements in them, so I don't want to, you know, badmouth them. I think I said like the one that I was most disappointed in, but let me not belabor the point.
Mm,
Um, so okay.
yeah. Do we want to give it like the entire series an overall letter grade?
Uh, yeah, I guess
I did.
okay, go for yours then.
C plus.
B plus. Okay.
Consistent with the way we kind of rank episode or issues as far as that goes. We've very rarely leaked into the DF range. We're
Yeah.
passing these books along, and little Timmy gets to go to fourth grade. But yeah, it's C plus for me. It's one of the weaker ones, which is too bad because it has a lot of my favorite, you know, nobody cares about side characters.
Yeah. I guess I'll go with C plus there as well. It's kind of a my conception of, B is like enjoyable and uh, better or worse, but when you dip into C, there's a serious flaw, and there are serious flaws in
Right.
Spitfire, and whether it's the publishing of it or behind the scenes, it's not an unalloyed pleasure. So Fair enough.
Never hated it, but definitely was left scratching my head.
There you go. Well, we'll move on to Nightmask, which only had issues 7 to 12 in this case. Nightmask. Keith Remsen is a young paranormal who can enter people's dreams in the disguise Nightmask. With his sister Teddy as a psychic anchor, guidance from Dr. Lucian Ballard, and fan service from physical therapist Lita Mercado, he helps others at the Ballard Dream Clinic. So, Nightmask was a fairly low stakes book with about a paranormal who had the power to enter other people's dreams, and his sort of family and support group that that were like real psychologists. So to have a legitimate purpose for this, they've got a whole clinic and real patients, and sometimes government contacts coming in and stuff like that. All with the purpose of him going into people's dreams and either figuring out what they can't, solve for themselves, or some clue that'll help a real world mystery come together, something like that. We had some interesting things with a rival, the Gnome, early, who was responsible for the death of his parents. And Madame Midnight, that was pretty cool too. But overall, it's been a little bit more like patient of the month kind of issues. We started off in number 7 with Lita's brother. The Thomases writing this yet?
I believe so, yes.
So Roy Thomas and Dan Thomas had taken over this, and certainly they looked at Lita's brother's strange behavior and getting in gang fights, and tried to solve some of that problem because, of course, Lita is an important part of their team.
Issue 7 also notably had the art from Michael Baer in like the workout montage that heavily featured the glutes.
Oh yeah, there was a little more spice in that one than we usually get. But then, speaking of art, number 8, one of my favorite New Universe fill-in artists, we'll call him, Keith Giffen, comes by and illustrated a real interesting story of someone's dreams about justice, the other New Universe title. And Keith is kind of lost in the dream for a long time and doesn't really understand what's going on. But eventually it sort of all makes sense. And it's pretty good talking about his sense of guilt over losing his parents, survivor's guilt, I guess, that sort of thing. And Giffen's expressionistic work really fit in really well in that issue. Then that's sort of, we get to a second issue that seems to be kind of treading the same ground, but it was Mark Bagley's first work, perhaps.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's more of Keith's internal self dreams, dreaming about a mysterious woman who is obviously Lita Mercado, and again, dream a little guilty about his situation.
That one's another key issue because it is the first appearance of werewolf Lucian Ballard. If you don't remember that one, it's just one of the cool parts about that issue was there was some pieces where Keith wasn't sure if he was dreaming or not, so he like went to talk to Lucian at night, and Lucian started getting kind of weird and turned into a werewolf and tried to eat him.
There was I mean, Bagley for an early work was doing pretty good job there. A lot of very weird dream imagery, even in a more realistic style than Giffen's. Nevertheless, it was very clear, like he's dreaming these bizarre characters, like Sesame Street character and Alice in Wonderland, all trying to kill him, and
right,
werewolves and things like that. I mean, even if it was kind of a felt fill-in, it was a very fun story. So yeah, no complaints there. And then we jump into the But I really think of as Roy Thomas producing some strong work here. So this trilogy of issues starts off with a Lucian ballad, Teddy and Keith in a mystery where Lucian gets a message from home. Keith's kind of doesn't know what's going on with him, but he starts acting strangely and having a run of bad luck. Things just sort of spill on him, but then he also is like short-tempered and yelling at someone unusually. And Keith and Teddy were invited with him to go to a psychiatrist convention in New Orleans where they're going to expose some of the Nightmask work to the public, just kind of looming over that. So Lucian's background is that he grew up in Haiti, and so they know that there's some connection there, but they don't really realize how deep his family is connected to voodoo in Haiti. We start seeing little hints of it, and we see a couple of mystery characters who are talking to Keith and maybe stealing locks of his hair, things like that. And so we think something's going on. And when we finally get a airplane to New Orleans, Lucian has to go back to get something. And it appears that he's being kidnapped actually out of the airport. So it's going to happen there, we thought. The next
We got
issue.
an evil twin situation. Evil twin
What?
situation.
No. Yes, that's exactly what we have. So we've got a convention in New Orleans, and they're doing some sightseeing with Keith and Teddy and Lucian, who shows up there and doesn't have, nothing's going on. Everything's perfectly normal. Oh, except he starts picking fights with the other psychiatrists and like trashing his own reputation, leaving little X's at Madame Laveau's cemetery, all kinds of crazy stuff. And as the mystery builds, and Keith is having these recurring dreams where he's fighting a giant white snake, not the band, I mean a real Conan thing. They finally reveal the secret of what's going on, and that is that Lucian had been replaced by his evil twin.
Sorry for spoiling that on you.
I'm sorry. But, usually that would sound pretty trite to me, but it was a lot of fun. And it was like, oh, that actually works in the new universe. It's like, we don't know Lucian's family from Adam. So maybe, why not?
It sounds very Scooby-Doo, but it was well put together.
Well put together. So we finally went to a confrontation at a humfo in Haiti.
Where?
Humfo?
Humfo?
That's what the Loa told us to go to.
To the humfo.
What was the title of it? There was when you're like a big man in voodoo. I forget now.
Oh yeah, I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Mambo was the lady one.
All right. And he researched voodoo so far down that I was glad to see he had not sacrificed a chicken to get our ratings up.
I was just trying to show you up.
Final confrontation between Keith and this evil Tullius in both the physical world and the imaginary Loa world, where Keith is now representing Damballa, and Tullius is channeling the chained beast. And thanks to help from Teddy, actually, Keith wins. Tullius is embarrassed, and everyone sort of disbelieves his connection now to the voodoo gods. And there's that kind of it's not like a great ending, but there's a nice kind of quiet moment at the end where Keith's talking to Teddy and this Mambo Matilda, who kind of guided them through this. He's trying to get a favor for Teddy, but he can't, and they just sort of realize they have to continue with their life as it is.
Mm-hmm. They did a nice job in that of like not going too magic-y, like my voodoo powers allow me to have super strength and fly or whatever. It was like all of the voodoo stuff really kind of played out in Keith's dream world, or almost like an interesting waking dream kind of thing they did at the end of it. But yeah, like ultimately it was kind of like he was defeated um, because the other people lost confidence in him. So like he lost his power over them as like they saw that he could fail. Like it wasn't like, the voodoo spirit was banished and exploded and or manifested itself in the real world and started hitting people. It did a nice job kind of keeping it new universe real, not like God's walk the earth Marvel style kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, Nightmask is an interesting case because it kind of walks a line that can veer into mystery or horror or fantasy, and doesn't want to get too deep into any of them, but has a sort of an entry point to them. And so between the dream worlds of various patients, or in this case, this sort of mass dream of the religious fervor of these people that were following this guy. I don't know. It hangs together. It tells a good story, and I wasn't going to complain about oh, you can only have paranormals, but you can't have this or that. That's maybe the wrong approach to take with the comics.
Maybe.
I would say what worked, the characters were pretty consistent, and the setup was pretty basic and could be repeated with a lot of different stories. And so, we had things that were sometimes, more fun than others, but you don't have to get too far off of that formula to have a fun story. Some new characters come in, you try to figure out their problem or their conflict.
Like can't
read, brother trying to kill me. Where's the Native Americans? I forget, arguing over an inheritance, stuff like that.
Yep.
I mean, it would work as a TV show for a while. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me, like what worked is pretty much a mirror of what you said, right? Like the core concept wise, this is one of my favorites for the new universe. Because it's not really like a brand new idea, but it still felt like kind of a new idea. The dream world scenarios kind of thing. He doesn't really have powers, right? He can't punch somebody out better in a street fight than anyone else has been trained by Lita, but he can fall asleep next to their couch and solve their dream problems.
When he would like just fall asleep to go, I gotta go help out.
Right,
never failed to crack me up.
That was his secret power. But yeah, and like really like the characters, whether they were truly well developed or not. They were all kind of a lot of fun, right? So Lita and Teddy and Keith being kind of horny a bunch of the times in his dreams, or like chasing after Lady Midnight kind of relentlessly and things like that. It's pretty fun. But yeah, so yeah, the characters and the setup was some of my favorite. So
it's but yeah, the so is there a problem with it? It's kind of low stakes, I guess.
Yeah, low stakes, and then you never get like the conclusion to some of the things they were setting up, right? Basically the gnome Midnight story. It's like, oh no, she's got your dreams saved in her dream memory banks now. Like or no, she could get to Teddy was like the threat. And then she never showed up again, unfortunately.
So we would have liked to see more with that storyline go somewhere. Would that have helped? I don't know, but
I don't know. It probably wouldn't have helped save the series, but like it would have been nice to have closure. I think in the like way later comics, the like return to the new universe stuff, which I've never read, like there's like a gnome follow-up or something, but
I think you're right. Yeah,
the comics look so funky and modern.
It's a very different art style.
Yeah, I don't like it.
I don't know. Maybe it's for later, but I would say even with these some of these series, you could take you could find like a good 4 issues that you could like spin a decent trade paperback out of. Not necessarily the first 4 or the last 4, but sometimes you can, put together a decent run. And this, I mean, like I just said, that last 3 issues is a pretty solid. It's a little harder for the early issues because you don't have that payoff that we would have liked.
Right.
Otherwise, I would say those would also be a good.
Yeah, I think it also has the best covers of the bunch of like these first 4. I think by far has like the coolest, most interesting.
Very nice. Yeah.
Covers.
Sandy Plunkett does a few of them and writes a couple of things. And that, it's a real nice style. Absolutely. Do we have a grade for Nightmask?
I do. I gave it a B+. I don't remember falling in love with everything when I was reading each issue because it's like some of them, especially in the earlier group, weren't that good. Like some of the fill-in-y kind of ones, but they were always still kind of fun. But looking back on it, like I just have fond memories. Like I kind of want to read it again. Like this is one of them for sure. I wished kept going.
I'll throw out a B. It seems like whenever I'd read it, I'd give an issue a B. It always feels like I enjoyed reading it. It's maybe not super memorable or, like higher or lower than that, but an enjoyable comic. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I mean, for this part, we got like 3 issues with a heavy Lita Mercado focus. We had that cool Justice stalking the, weirdo in his dreams. And then we had kind of like a conclusive arc with Damballa. So it was a pretty solid back half of Nightmask. There wasn't any real stinkers.
That's true. Yeah. Justice as seen through a third character. Yeah, that still is like one of my favorite appearances of Justice as well. It's
yeah, having him like actually like terrifying and kind of like menacing is really an interesting look for him. All right, do we move on?
Yeah, let's head on to the next.
Kickers Incorporated.
Kickers Incorporated. Yeah, we
sound like a British comedy troupe kind of voice. So Kickers Inc. issues 7 through 12. Top professional football player and everyone's favorite quarterback, Jack Magniconti, gains real superpowers, possibly from his shifty scientist brother, but probably from the White Event, maybe with a combination of buzzing sounds. When his brother is killed, he bands together with his wife and his teammates to form Kickers Inc., a last resort answer to people who need help and can use a phone book, as well as a target for CIA scams. Because dang, CIA, man, like just the bane of the new you. But so far, all it's cost Jack is his quarterback position, football team, and any public respect. But he did manage to keep his marriage together somehow. It was close.
That was helpful, yeah.
It was close. So yeah, I always kind of want to go back to issue 1 again. Just it's become a bit epic in my mind. But yeah, he gets classic powers from the White Event, Captain America style, kind of strength, speed, moderate invulnerability, not Superman level. He forms up with the Kickers. They go on a couple of wacky adventures. We have an interesting DP7 crossover in the early on. But from 7 through 12, the back half and end of the series, issue 7 was the Circus of Crime. I loved it. Jack also starting to run into issues with people recognizing that maybe something's up with him, whether he's just on super steroids or something. Issue 8 was the Super Bowl in which the Kickers lost and Jack bailed on them. So the last bit of football that we see in Kickers Inc., which made me sad because I spent all this time working on the roster. Probably the only person to bother to do that in the history of the new universe, but maybe I give myself too much credit. Issue 9 had the tennis issue right? So tennis match, battle of the
Battle of the
sexes.
sexes, yeah.
Yeah. Jack got canned, sort of, maybe, or at least suspended. 10 was an interesting break. So this was kind of the back half was them kind of getting back to some sort of adventures. But yeah, the CIA sets him up to go on this mission to rescue some crashed pilots. Puts everybody in danger. Jack ends up having to kind of save the day and rescue all his friends and kill people in the process. And they did kind of a nice job focusing on like the emotional impact of that. Jack is always kind of a struggle, whereas in the beginning he was very much like, all right, I can do this, let's win. Then he's kind of like, well, I almost decapitated that guy in the football field. And I had to kill these South Americans because of the CIA. And so a bit of an internal struggle. And even between writers, that seems to be a common thread that kind of worked. Issue 11, yeah, you wrote Jack versus undocumented janitor, comma mob. I wrote kickers versus cocaine janitor.
It's not really versus on janitor, but yeah, well, continuing, yes.
But yeah, their janitor who was apparently doing a nice job cleaning the place. It would have been funny if he had connections to Steve Magnicanti or something, but was a cocaine mule basically, and some of the kickers tried to rescue him, and Jack was trying to throw him in jail, and so it was a bit of a throwdown. It was a pretty wacky issue. And then 12, which was our final, didn't always feel like a final. It's like a strange charity run where they get into a bar fight with some Canadian hockey players, and then in order to kind of rescue their reputation, they have like a charity race where they jog through the wilderness with no cameras. But the CIA was like trying to sabotage them and trying to figure out whether or not all of the kickers had some kind of secret ability. So they end up basically trying to kill all the regular kickers and, putting Jack in this weird scenario with hologram Bigfoot and aliens and exploding cabins, and it's pretty bonkers, honestly. As far
He
as
tells everyone about it. It's like it's too crazy. Like no one believes him. But
yeah, and that was kind of it. Like it wasn't really, it didn't have much wrap up. Whereas Nightmask tried to kind of throw something in at the end to kind of give a little bit of closure with some characters. Kickers Inc. just kind of ended. It ended weird.
it really would have, benefited from an extra issue at least to kind of get some of this a little bit cleared up, because it's another case where it seemed like people were doing things behind the scenes, and Jenny never noticed that the CIA was lying to her about her father, and the kickers never noticed that the CIA was pulling strings for at least two or three of these issues behind their backs. Yeah, there was even though it always sounded very inconsistent, like we were saying before, if you read them issue to issue, this is actually like there's a creative team of Altaville and Kavanaugh
Yeah.
that starts in about issue 6, where there's this Jack thwarts a jetliner hijacking.
Yeah.
Then they do the Circus of Crime, and that's a lot of fun. And then the Super Bowl and the Battle of the Sexes. Then it's two other writers on 10 and 11. And they come, and the Kavanaugh and Altaville come back for 12. So those are, like I was saying, you can kind of, with those 5, that's not a bad run, honestly. It feels more uneven because the issues that they put in the middle there were like more unlike that they'd been doing. But their style I found pretty fun. It's definitely lighter. It's almost a comedy book in some ways.
Yeah, Jack in particular, as written by them, was like a little bit childlike. It's like, oh boy, oh
Dopey.
boy, oh boy, I want to go too. And it's like, I want to see Bigfoot. Maybe we'll find him.
Easily distracted, yeah. But I mean the fill-in, well, the extra issues, that CIA mission where Jack kills someone, that was talked about before as a potential crossover with Merc, which would have been pretty interesting.
Yeah, because it was kind of advertised to be, and then they probably had to like
Rewrites.
rewrite it a little bit and throw it out there.
And I think the 11 was like another new writer or something, and it was a case where it was more that the writer sort of overstuffed the issue. There was like a lot of panels on a page or something, and it was just, even if it
That
was an
one was a
okay
bit
story,
much.
yeah, it felt like overstuffed. So
That was Dwight Zimmerman.
okay, I don't remember if
Yeah,
he
it was
comes
the only
back
time we
later.
saw him.
So there's fun issues in there, and the if you sit down to read Kickers Inc. all at once, you're kind of, the tonal whiplash is a bit much, but spread out once a month, I had a pretty good time with most of them. Yeah.
I really did too, and I think like it's probably like the most like butt of the joke for the new universe. Like on the outside, people will remember or just look at and say like this is the most garbage comic book of the new you kind of thing. But yeah, I really kind of liked it. It's just like there's not much downside. There's like a little twinge of so bad it's good kind of stuff. Maybe more on the early on than later stuff, but yeah, I'm a little bit of a football fan. I'm not like crazy football guy, but
He's
like
got a big foam finger on his hand right as he's speaking right now.
raw, raw. Actually, the NFL draft is going on today, like right now. So if I was really hardcore, I'd probably be watching that or something. Just like people reading a list of names you could just look at tomorrow. But yeah, like the football was kind of fun. I liked the. I mean, whether it was intended or not, like the whole series kind of had an arc of like Jack trying to kind of deal with having these powers, and I think it kind of worked. I always likened it to like yeah, again, he's kind of like Captain America, but he's a real dude, right? So like he's not going to be perfect all the time, and he's susceptible to like ego and maybe wanting to make money, or he gets a little like weird and overprotective with his kickers guys after that CIA mission gone wrong kind of thing, and loses his temper a little bit, and he's like a real person instead of like super perfect guy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the other characters who have paranormal powers are trying to keep a low profile, but if you're like a celebrity and you suddenly have the power to like steamroll over people like that, yeah, it's like he's doubly careful, and yet has twice as many temptations, I guess, going around to use the power in this situation and that situation. Um, the moral, yeah, the morality of some of it was a little was we kind of laughed at as well, because it does seem like continuing in his sporting career was a bad idea, but
Yeah. Or letting the mob kill some crazy chemist guy.
But yeah, it's definitely a book with a bad reputation, and yet it's not unreadable by our standards, certainly. So.
Yeah, this is like 1,000 times better than NFL Super Pro, the football themed book of the 90s. That was exceptionally bad. This has got some good writing and some decent art and some fun stories, and doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah, it's what you call it. Football is always sort of a like less. There's less movies about football. There was a few in the 70s, I think, but generally, baseball is like the cinematic sport, I guess. There's Field of Dreams and a number of things where it's like, oh, even Major League, you're like the myth of the game and blah blah blah. Football is a little more, I don't know.
It's slow and you can't see the actors' faces, right? I mean, they got to wear these all-encompassing masks kind of stuff. Like, so it's not going to make good movies. Like, it's just not exciting enough. It doesn't translate to movies because I think the people who like football are like excited about the team that might win or kind of like that. Anything can happen. What's going to happen next kind of thing. But in the movie football, it's always like a little like cartoonish hits kind of stuff or like Rudy and like these like stupid feel good stories about the guy who just pulls off that one moment just because he cared enough kind of thing. Or no offense, Rudy fans, but yeah, it just doesn't work. Like it's fundamentally, I think, would be hard to make a good football comic or a good football movie kind of thing. I think people like that Friday Night Lights TV series, but I'm guessing that was more about the characters than the game stuff. That being said, I've never watched it, so I probably shouldn't opine on it too much. Yeah, football's a tough sell. Like nobody's ever going to make a popular football comic, I don't think. Any sports, honestly, just doesn't translate well to comics, and sequential art versus like live movement is just, I don't think it works.
Well, I mean, what, aren't there a bunch of sports manga though?
That's a good point. Yeah,
It's
but
like
yeah,
you,
their
you have
style
one with
differences.
tennis or something.
Yeah, there's tennis, basket. Pretty much every sport I think has a manga on it. Yeah,
Okay.
maybe you just need the Japanese to pull it off.
Yeah, it's slightly different story style. So
Well, they're all pretty much hero's journey, right? Like some scrappy kid who happens to have like some exceptional skill at, throwing a curveball or something, and an escalating series of matchups.
hmm.
But yeah, they're all the same story, I think,
Yeah,
fundamentally.
yeah.
But yeah, you
Fair
got
enough.
me on that one. You're right. The manga stuff is actually pretty interesting. The American comics, not so much.
Uh,
Yeah, but what
well,
happened to the fist? Come on, the fist.
yeah.
Can we
There
get a
was a
backup?
number of things that did not get payoffs. Darlene was sick in one issue and then never heard from again. Jack's maybe getting fired was not really brought. They were kind
Yeah.
of cagey about what happened with that and his drug test and everything. I don't know.
Suicides one day, drug problem and stuff.
He's popping Demerol like they're Pez one issue and then the
Can't
next.
reach the pills, just need the pills. Yeah, that moment where like the janitor had crashed into him and like he was on the ground, writhing in pain and trying to get his pills while the janitor was trying to hide the cocaine before a brick wall got to him. It's like,
Okay, I maybe I was unfair giving a hard time to number 11. That was pretty funny.
yeah, but no, it was overwritten. Like there was just too much. Like the fundamentals of the comic books were a little rough there, even if some of the moments were pretty great. Like where they tricked the mobsters into letting them run a football play with the kid they were gonna kill, and finally used their,
Heartwarming, yes.
you know.
Okay. Oh, should we have a
So that's
grade
why
on
that's why I like it. So, are we at overall rating time?
it? Is there more to say about kickers? I feel bad like that these are the last things we're going to talk about these books, like as a
I will
whole.
somehow work the ghost of Steve Magniconti into things. Gotta always bring it in conversation.
I think I forgot to point out the kickers versus the Canadians like smacked of the Miracle on Ice to me.
Uh, hmm,
It's a little, I mean, it's Russians, but a couple years before there's like the big ice hockey standoff. And so having Canadian hockey team be like the anti kickers cracked me up a lot. I mean,
yeah, that's that missed opportunity though. Like they could have been kind of like a rival. Even if you went like total ham and like one of the hockey guys ended up getting powers from the white event or something, then you have like a real interesting rivalry or
yeah.
something. But like they beat them to the scene of the rescue or the call or whatever kind of thing. These blasted Canadians got here first. Like we'll show them, we'll be the real saviors, and then they all kind of end up wrecking everything because they don't get along.
Yeah, this Altaville and Kavanaugh's like creativity was pretty high. I mean, they would just have like a new secretary you hadn't seen before who would flirt with suicide. And it would be like it would crack you up. I mean, the circus of crime, that whole issue was just one insane character after another.
I'm a
Um,
sucker for circus villains.
Good times, good
Though I don't
times.
really like the Joker that much. So
Mm.
too edgy nowadays. So I ranked this one a B. Again, it was always kind of one of my favorites, even though if it objectively had some comic book problems. I put it a little below Nightmask, which I'm not really sure why, but a little below Nightmask.
I do as well, so I give it a B minus, I guess. It's in the enjoyable range, but some of the shifts and changing artists and things. Maybe I'm being a little harder on it there than I need to be, but
Well, the second half was definitely better than the first, which is good, right? It improved. And one of
yeah,
our issues was basically a DP7 issue.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's hard to count that. It's so like extra DP7 than an extra kickers. Um, but overall, yeah, I don't regret a moment of reading it. So there you
No.
go.
So yeah, go buy a run of Kickers Inc. Don't believe the haters. Just read it.
Let's
Tell them we
see.
sent you, and then go to kickersinc.com.
Also, our Twitter handle, Kickers Inc.
I'll throw in
Um,
self plug there.
all right. The next issue on our list and the last of the canceled books, Mark Hazzard Merc, going from 7 to 12 plus the annual. So we did have a spare here and it's double sized. So
I guess that puts it as the probably the highest page count of the bunch.
I guess so, yeah. We're lucky that annual came out because otherwise it would have felt pretty unsatisfying.
Yeah, if you never got the actual life or death of Mark Hazzard before the comic stopped publishing, that'd be a bit of a problem.
Mm,
Though then we could
Mark,
imagine he's still alive. So
yeah. I mean, I've got a vivid imagination. I read a lot of comic books. People get off their deathbeds all the time. Mark Hazzard Merc, combat veteran Mark Hazzard, had been a soldier of fortune since Vietnam, but he lost his relationship with his son and ex wife. He tried to put his family back together and reevaluate his life while dealing with the real world repercussions from his decades of fighting. Where did it get him?
got him dead.
Ah. So we first met Mark Hazzard. He's a mercenary. He's doing overseas missions, but then he's coming home and trying to do like domestic stuff with his family and still getting dragged into crazy anti-terrorist missions here at home. Um, we we had a couple of memorable issues to start off the series. Then we had a couple of less memorable issues by the same writer, Peter David, but the art was getting pretty rushed. So don't know what happened with all behind the scenes there, but all the way back in issue 5, we get a new writer, and it's Doug Murray, who'd started the Nom recently. And whenever I read top 10 lists in Marvel Age, it's one of the top 10 books that Marvel is putting out month to month. So pretty popular stuff. Um, Even though, as we say, military books seem to be a hard sell at this point in time.
Yeah. It's funny. I opened up my notes page for Merc 5, and it was writer Peter David, pages 1 through 4, Doug Murray, the rest.
Oh my gosh.
Just strange. And I wrote, nice gray Moro cover, crapola interior art.
Ah, I mean, yeah. Even the guys who did it were like slightly embarrassed. by how it turned out, it sounded like sometimes. Rockowitz's interview, see also. And we start off with a series of stories that don't really seem to add up to very much, but as it turns out, Murray was on the book all the way to the end from that point. So it's a 8 plus annual 9 or 10 issue series where he is unfortunately kind of disassembling Mark's initial supporting cast and putting in a new supporting cast. But he doesn't seem to get Mark Hazzard himself. Always sort of seemed to be the problem. So it started off with a fight with his friend Mal, the explosives expert, and his sister's boyfriend is trying to get killed. There's a new woman named Priestess who shows up. And then we had the infamous Mark bodyguarding I guess he's supposed to be a neo-Nazi or something somewhere in Europe. And there's a fight with Treetop over how well he should adhere to his contract. And he ends up shooting Treetop and leaving that little group of mercenaries. But that's, more covered probably in our previous recap episode. This should focus on 7 to 12, where 7, we had a Central America rescue mission for a commander. We met Doc, who was a Vietnamese woman, I think, Sergeant Major, and a pilot named Ritter.
Ritter with the mustache.
One of the Ritters. Doc didn't just stayed where they were performing the mission. So we've got Ritter and Sergeant Major as future recruits or something. Then a issue with a Vatican mission over in Beirut, trying to rescue a priest. And Mark is teamed with a clean-cut young priest who's, I guess, also a psychopathic killer. But
I labeled him Jesus's favorite assassin.
Then we get a first appearance, maybe, of
Discount Mark Hazzard.
Discount Mark Hazzard.
Oh, actually, before we get too far, issue 8 is another key issue. That's the first appearance of the Treetop Copter, the wheelchair with a helicopter on the top with guns mounted on the side.
If he had just worked with the troubleshooters, he definitely could have made that dream into reality.
Right?
Teamwork makes the dream work. So we've got a new guy who shows up looking for Mark, who's down on his luck. The last couple of issues had him losing his regular crew, then having trouble finding work, and being, supposedly desperate for work. So Discount Mark Hazzard and his grandfather start putting together a mission where there's a operation to deliver, was it Stingers?
Stinger missiles to the Taliban.
The Taliban. We all love the Taliban, right?
What could go wrong?
There's a second part of the mission that requires a decoy mission. And Mark and Ritter
without the mustache.
And Mal, was it?
Mark and Ritter went on that one, and Mal and Discount Mark Hazzard went on the actual delivery. That was the box labeled farm implements that actually had farm implements in it.
Yeah, shoot them down. All I got back is farm implements.
Throw a rake at him or something.
So the mission was a success. If arming the Taliban is your definition of success. However, Mark was captured in Iran, which
not a good place to be in prison.
Also, yeah. There's a place called Bandar Abbas, which is a crappy prison in Iran. And Mark was being threatened, and I think they shot Ritter number two, firing
Yes.
squad.
Ritter
So,
Sans mustache was murdered.
so back home in New York, Discount Mark starts putting together a rescue team with Priestess, Sergeant Major, Treetop is back, Mal, and a new guy, Gar Bremby, a one-armed weapons dealer. These guys all
Don't forget the random karate
two
school guy in
students.
sweatpants.
Priestess brought two students who really should have gotten killed at that point. They were fighting with swords and maybe a sai or nunchuck. I don't know. It was like
It's a bad plan.
yeah, not the best, but they head over to the Straits of Hormuz or whatever. The airdrop into the ocean, some inflatable rafts. Then they hijack a Iranian ship, take it into the harbor with the prison, all this sort of thing. Mark is meanwhile being tortured, and I think they were ready to kill him too the next day. But by the time the rescue squad gets there, he is choked out and killed the guard who was coming to kill him. So he's back in form. But the next issue, they show more of this escape. He has to get out. Mark takes a detour to make sure to kill the warden who had annoyed him, but they take him back to the U.S. Lynn Discount gives him a letter telling him that his who had set him up, like who told the Iranians that this decoy mission was Mark. He goes back and almost immediately confronts the character from issue 2, maybe Henri Greymalkin. There's a French businessman slash arms something.
He's got some kind of shady dealings that Mark Hazzard had thwarted in the past, right? So it was sort of unclear. Maybe given what we got in the annual, it could almost connect it back to like one of those times where like Mark switched sides or was on the other side of some conflict that Malkin was in, but we'd be probably giving them too much of a benefit to connect those dots for the writer.
That's true. Whatever he was, in the previous issue, he had been trying to kill Mark Hazzard, but sort of getting Mark's ex-wife's new husband, sort of pumping him for information, or just this time, Mark basically gets that the new husband was purposefully trying to get him killed, and so he kills Greymalkin. Do not pull a gun on Mark Hazzard. It's the lesson here.
Or if you're good, don't miss.
Don't miss. Goes back to his ex-wife's house, and in a final confrontation with the new husband, the guy confesses that he was trying to get Mark killed. They kill each other, basically, or at least Mark ends up on the floor in an uncertain state. And
thus ruining all of his tough guy credibility that we built up all until then, right?
Nobody can kill him except for when you're getting shot. What is he? Frankenstein? Hazzard, kill.
Knock the gun out of his hands and feed it to him. Come on.
So we were left up in the air for a bit there as a 12th issue then becomes just Merc. So this and Spitfire were the two books that changed title literally. And Merc was just Discount Mark Hazzard and Sergeant Major still working together, now training Afghan troops to take on Russian troops in Afghanistan. And Discount's bright idea was to take the war to Russia. They will definitely not feel threatened by that across their borders.
Bringing a team of tens of Afghan freedom fighters and their children.
It's a strange tale of, I don't know, well, not, military strategy gone horribly awry.
It's really dumb, but it gave us a chuckle.
It did end up like we're not quite sure whether this was he was also getting killed on the last page.
He's still out there to this day fighting against the Russians.
The Japanese guys on those islands that like didn't 20 years later didn't know the war was over.
Yeah, pretty much.
Could be, yeah. So this was a dark place to leave the book, but so luckily we got an annual, and probably my favorite annual of the bunch.
It was definitely the best Mark Hazzard issue of the season.
It was. It was a
didn't have much competition though.
And amazingly, the same writer did manage to finish it out with a really solid story that both wrapped up Mark's current story, but gave us a lot of flashbacks to everyone's memories of Mark. How and you'd sort of piece together, Mark's life through their eyes. So, and a lot of their eyes too, or their own backstories. So we got the backstories of Sergeant Major, Priestess, Discount Mark Hazzard, Treetop, Mal. Am I missing one? Joan. And altogether it was like a Forrest Gump collage of 1960s to 80s America. And while it still didn't kind of get inside Mark Hazzard, at least it gave us a solid story with him in the center. And really enjoyed that. And it paid off, since the guy had been apparently working towards that for this entire phase of the project. I felt better about all of that by the end.
Yeah, to a degree.
So what worked in Mark Hazzard Merc?
Season 2, nothing.
It was frustrating, and it had a couple of moments, but overall, not much. What was the problem? Again, I didn't, even though they tried to switch him out, I didn't feel that like the guy hated Mark Hazzard so much, as just thought going in a new direction would be an improvement. But
yeah,
there's no reason to think that.
They seem to want to kind of take Mark Hazzard as more of like a force of nature kind of thing. Like he would show up and be competent and tough and like win. But like, Peter David had kind of ruined us with that interesting internal dialogue that Mark Hazzard has. Like he might not say that much, but we know kind of what's going on in his head, and it's interesting. Whereas like we just dropping that completely was kind of jarring. And then like the missions were kind of cheesy, and the new characters didn't get any introduction until the annual, which was the final bit of Mark Hazzard you get. So the writing, unfortunately, was just not good. As far as that goes, there's not very much. And while like the moment in the annual of like, they unplugged the life support was kind of nice, and I actually kind of felt that a little bit. The death is so unsatisfying. It's just like, no, that's not right. It's like if Rambo got killed by like one of the goons in the beginning, like a generic, Viet Cong, fighter. And it's like, oh, isn't he supposed to be the best?
Spends an hour on life support as each of us goes and gives our memory of. I remember meeting Rambo. It was like 68 in Da Nang. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
Or if
So
Chuck Norris went back to Vietnam to rescue some POWs and didn't rescue anybody, unsatisfying. If no one gets
um
roundhouse kicked.
so I mean, because they were so early in saying that one of the characters was going to die, I could only assume that the sales were pretty low on this.
Yeah. And
The
it seemed like,
genre is a hard sell.
yeah,
Even with like the Nom doing well and the writer of Nom on this, for whatever reason, not doing his best. I can't imagine this was a big. And they were like, okay, we give up.
there's a twinge of we're going to reboot it. Not as much as we got from Spitfire, but it seemed like they were totally heading for discount Mark Hazzard for taking over for Mark Hazzard. And like by the covers and by the solicits and that kind of stuff. It seemed like they were building to that, but it took a long time for one.
That
But then
too, yeah.
also, maybe by the time they were coming around to it, it was also like, oh, okay, no, like nobody's buying this thing.
Yeah, thinking about it, you're right. These issues were so open. Like I'd complained about a new writer being overwriting something before. Here, everything was kind of underwritten. Um, like Starbrand, I always say I really like because there's not a lot of writing. It's open for art and it's uh, well, whatever. It goes faster, let's say.
Yeah.
A lot of these issues had a similar, amount of story, but with, less satisfying art. I guess it wasn't. um, it also added up to feeling a little too brief sometimes.
Yeah, the even the better Peter David stuff was kind of wrecked by like very rushed looking art. And then if the art picked up a little bit, then that's kind of that was a bit of the problem. Like the art was bad and the writing was good, and then the art improved a little bit, but then the writing tanked and boy.
Yeah, I don't know what to think because there even at this time there was books like book series. I mean, you don't even have like much in the way of men's adventure fiction anymore, but there was like, Mac Bolan, the
The executioner, yeah.
executioner, yeah, yeah. That sort of stuff that maybe influenced the Punisher was still around. It wasn't as popular, but there were books about, military teams. So Soldier of Fortune was, I think, popular magazine. All this kind of stuff was out there. So even um, I always, think that it should, things like this should find an audience, but I don't know how possible that even was.
Yeah, I mean the era was like the king of the action movie too. Like, from the like the high end stuff with Arnold and like Predator and stuff like that, like down to, like the lower rung movies, the direct to video and the Chuck Norrises and stuff like that. Like there's just a ton of room for that kind of thing. Like it was really popular, but maybe less so in the comic book world. But yeah, maybe that's it. It's like comic book fans aren't really always closely associated with like sports fans, like kickers, and then also maybe not like guns blazing action hero kind of fans too. A little more like nerdy sci-fi superhero fans, but I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's an
Guess.
interesting. Yeah, with trying to get the normie audience. Maybe there's you go for an outreach title. Maybe.
Yeah. But I guess it was a
Um,
tough sell new universe in general too. So
that's
you know,
true.
because I think they had good ideas, but you were selling it to a very fickle comic book reading audience that likes their Marvel to be Spider-Man.
I mean, at this point, though, we're still on the newsstands, and so we've still got. Um, I don't think it's gone completely into comic book shops. Certainly later, it goes direct market only.
Yeah.
New universe. But at this point, even if there's some stuff out there that people will come across, but if they don't recognize that's not Iron Man, what do I want this for?
There's a girl in there. Yeah,
Um,
it could have really benefited from like that Kickers crossover would have been more fun than what we got, or if there was like a paranormal that showed up or something, like give me a little bit of like Mark Hazzard and some guy giving him all he can handle kind of thing.
that would have been a real interesting direction to go.
Like if there
Yeah,
was some like invulnerable paranormal guy like that Mark Hazzard can't just shoot, and then they got to kind of figure it out, you know.
yeah, something that really challenged him with that. And then, as we've said before, also, we're not looking into the crystal ball too much, but we do know there's a like more militarized aspect to the new universe coming up on the horizon. We will
Yeah.
definitely be missing our like central military figure.
Yeah, it would have worked
brings
out.
that through.
Maybe his son can take over. uh,
Child soldiers are always pretty popular.
I gave this one a C as a series, maybe bolstered by issue 1 and 2 fairly heavily.
Mm,
I'm almost thinking C minus, honestly, but
let's see, if I said C plus for Spitfire, yeah, I'll take this down to a C as well. It's a slightly less satisfying than that, but it did have moments I greatly enjoyed. And as with most of the rest of the books, starting off, I was, yeah, this is fun. It seems like a positive direction. Let's see where we go with this. And the payoff was not satisfying, but
yeah. Spitfire, I'm kind of like, I think they could have done this better, but I wasn't really sad that it's gone. Merc was definitely like, I'm done. I'm tapped out. Like, I don't mind that it's canceled. And then, like Kickers, I can live with being gone, though I enjoyed it. And Nightmask is the one where I'm like, I really wish we had more Nightmask.
yeah, sort of thinking about it, I would say um, Merc was frustrating, Spitfire was frustrating, Kickers also, but it was sort of more lighthearted. So, but Nightmask feels like it was sort of on the border, like if it could have been renewed and it would have made as much sense to us. But I don't really think any of the renewed series we were like, oh, why did this get canceled instead? But I don't know, like I would say like Cyforce to Nightmask was the kind of middle of the road.
Yeah.
And so either of those could have flipped to the other side. And
Knowing what I know from reading ahead, I would trade one of these for Starbrand. Spoilers, but I totally understand why you wouldn't cancel Starbrand because it, was kind of like the initial star of the show. So
yeah, it's they're in a difficult spot with Shooter going, but they still got these titles going, and they're kind of don't want to keep producing them, but don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't know. It's a
yeah, maybe that's a good segue to our end point because clearly next time we'll be talking about the back. I don't know, what did we get? Like 2 issues of Starbrand and all the other uncanceled series.
yeah. So we'll hit the books that were not canceled. Try to you know point out their good points and whatever failings they had, and wrap up the second part of our season 2 recap episode. Whatever.
Episode, yeah. Issue is for comic, episode is for podcast. I
I
messed
will
that up in
learn
my
that
brain.
before we get to the end of this thing.
No, we won't. But it's okay. Not
Okay.
like we're drawing a salary.
So let's see. Until next week, catch us back at the same time and place.
Same new universe time, same new universe channel.
This has been the voice of the new universe, and we will see you then back at the spinner rack.
Goodbye.